an original MCM production.
Let me now call to the podium Joanna Karstead, the Managing Director and Senior Associate at G Strategies, Inc., who will introduce our speaker today. Joanna?
Hello. My name is Johanna Karstead, and I am thrilled to introduce our speaker today. I have had the privilege of working with Juli Kaufmann through my work at G Strategies, and I'm so excited for you to hear about what she's been up to in our great city. Juli Kaufmann is three things in my mind. She is an entrepreneur driven by philanthropic motives. She is a pioneer in innovative thinking, and she is a master collaborator. She believes that the success of any project can not only be measured by the profit it makes, but also by the impact it has on the planet and on people. Here in Milwaukee, she has focused her work on investments in businesses and buildings, driven by the belief that strong cities must have strong main streets. At the heart of every project is a concept that she calls the quadruple bottom line, which consists of 4 specific goals for each investment: long-term economic stability, environmental stewardship, social equality, and cultural continuity. One of Juli's most recognizable projects is the Clock Shadow building in the Walker's Point neighborhood. This 30,000 square foot commercial building was developed to reach aggressive environmental goals, to help attract more investments into the area, and to bring a diverse group of businesses into the neighborhood that brought with them jobs and opportunity. Juli combined for-profit and nonprofit strategies to raise the necessary $7 million for this out-of-the-box development project in a tough economic period. As Mayor Barrett recently stated, Juli's passion for community development projects and her willingness to take risks have led to great rewards for Milwaukee. Milwaukee is lucky to have her, and we are lucky to have her here to speak with us today. Please join me in welcoming Juli Kaufmann.
Thanks, Johanna. That was perfect. That was sweet. That's my whole speech. Any questions? Okay. So the story of fixed development is about the belief, in the face of quite a few industry naysayers, that socially just, as Johanna said, environmentally sustainable, culturally rich, real estate projects can not only be financially successful, but also generate excitement and energy that attracts entrepreneurs that revitalize communities. In my presentation briefly today, I'll highlight the strategies that we use to transform our most disinvested neighborhoods in Milwaukee by basically doing it ourselves. We leverage the power and the capacity of regular citizens using basic real estate and financing tools to disrupt traditional commercial real estate and financial systems. So let me tell you the story about how we do that and give our mission and a few examples of our work. Can you recognize where this is? This is Walker's Point, roughly a decade ago. As I see it, there are a lot of people who wish that their neighborhoods could be better, wish that neglected buildings would be cared for and improved, wish that vacant lots would be redeveloped and beautified, and wish that main streets were thriving with economic life. But we're often left to feel powerless to change these circumstances. That's because there are powerful systems in place that exert control over property development, financial systems that control how money flows, real estate systems that control how property is valued and protected, hello friends in the audience, and control of wealth concentrated among an exclusive set of investors. quickly move beyond. These systems conspire against our neighborhoods and our main streets. The results of these entrenched systems are certainly not good generally in low-income neighborhoods, but they're also not necessarily good in more prosperous places. The impacts can range from wholesale homogenization of places, hello, more friends, to the mega concentration of investments in very targeted areas. And while these are not bad things necessarily, these are the deals that traditionally do get done. Meanwhile, in areas where deals don't get done, the results range from sometimes benign neglect at best to chronic disinvestment at worst. And neighborhoods where the lowest income residents of our city reside tend to be disproportionately harmed. In my life's work, I've set out to try and innovate through these systems of real estate and financial barriers to give some control back to neighbors, to heal the harm that reduce some of these inequities in places, one building and one project at a time, with the aim of creating authentic, or organic, and beautiful places for community to happen. In my projects, I seek, as Johanna said, this quadruple bottom line. It's a return on investment in 4 areas: environmental sustainability, social justice, economic opportunity, and cultural enrichment, all important to a thriving city. I've been told by many people that integrating all of these impacts is not really financially viable in the private sector, in the real world. In the real world that I live in, I want all my neighbors to benefit from economic prosperity, and I have shown through my projects that these assertions about projects are untrue. You can make a financially viable project with all of those bottom lines. I make all of my project financial pro formas available publicly. I create case studies that document each of my projects. Most are already on my website, and if you don't find them there, please ask me. I'm happy to share all of the financial data to demonstrate how to get these projects done, because we need more of this, and I certainly don't want to be one of a few people doing it. So let's take a look at a couple of my projects. Let's start here with the simple first do-it-myself project in Walker's Point. This is, was built in 2004 on a previously contaminated brownfield lot. It's almost impossible to visualize this site 10 years ago because Walker's Point has changed so much. This house is, if you know where the Anodyne coffee roaster is in Walker's Point, right across the street. This was a arsenic-contaminated lot where a community garden was growing and people were eating toxic food. We redeveloped the lot, invested $500,000 to clean it up, and built 2 state-of-the-art green homes on the site. Today, the financial system tells me that according to a typical real estate appraisal of this property, this 2-dwelling development is worth $250,000 through a market appraisal. That's half of what it cost me to build 10 years ago. That's a recent appraisal. It's a perfect example of how traditional real estate and financial markets tend to conspire against leading-edge, neighborhood-driven change. Nobody in their right mind would have done this deal, or possibly could have done this deal, in the time that I did it. Meanwhile, consider this single-family home project I recently built in Shorewood. This home was allowed to deteriorate past the point of being saved because the owners can't be compelled to improve their properties. Typically, in more disinvested neighborhoods, this is a common sight. It's less common in places like Shorewood. Remarkable that I found it, actually, to be honest with you. But we deconstructed it because we couldn't save it, and we salvaged the building, or the site, excuse me, and we built this new environmentally sustainable home. It's made of mostly recycled materials. It's powered entirely by renewable energy. In this case, our house is now appraised at more than $500,000, although it cost just about half that to build. You see the flip of that? I share these 2 projects with you to dramatize the market disparities. The exact opposite economics of the project in Milwaukee apply here. $250 to build, valued at $500. In Milwaukee, $500,000 to build, valued at $250. How do we get shared economic prosperity for our disinvested neighborhoods when the odds of traditional real estate and financial systems are so flipped? In places that are already prosperous, the math works and tends to work well. In places that really need investment, it's stacked against them. So I set out to try and innovate to change the way these markets work on real estate development. The Clock Shadow building started as a vacant, contaminated brownfield lot in a disinvested neighborhood. Rather than relying on the traditional financial systems, I bought a lot that nobody at the time was interested in. It was the neighborhood dog poop lot. With 20 local investors, we came together, incidentally led by women. We made transformative building possible with that quadruple bottom line commitment. We built this national award-winning building made of nearly 50% recycled pieces, powered with renewable energy, and that uses rainwater to flush its toilets. Everybody wants that. Many other green features. This was recognized by the Association of Architects as one of the top 10 green projects in the world when it was built, in the country. It's a socially and culturally impactful building as well. The tenants include a first-of-its-kind creamery, the Clock Shadow Creamery, which is a cheese company. It's a place where very unique Milwaukee products are made. The Healing Collective, which is a group of innovative nonprofits that provide health and wellness services, things like acupuncture, massage, Reiki, yoga, and mental health services for all people, regardless of their income level. And a rooftop farm provides amazing views, grows food, and provides a special venue for Milwaukee's near south side. All of these things demonstrate that if we ignore the traditional real estate and financial markets and what they tell us, and if we just change the rules and find the money outside of those markets and build something we believe in that makes a difference on those 4 bottom lines, we can make places for people that matter, and for all people. Yet the challenges do remain. Although the investors in this project were definitely visionary, we still required a minimum investment of $250,000 per owner, and that excludes most Milwaukeeans. Additionally, the building required patient capital. It's still valued under traditional market valuation at 60% of what it costs to build. So that money is going to take a while to catch up to the value of the cost of the building. In the meantime, it is generating a 5% cash return. So there is a 5% annual financial return in addition to those social, cultural, and environmental impacts that each of those owners receives as a participant in the project. So we discovered a way to sort of self-fund and co-create a unique and innovative building. The next question I wanted to answer with my company is, can we continue the subversion of the traditional methods but make it more accessible to neighbors, more modest financial means? So we bought this former tannery. Anybody know what this is? It's Purple Door. Okay. Purple Door building, which brought together 15 local investors where the minimum share of ownership was only $10,000, much more accessible to many more people. And here we showed that real estate can be funded by neighbors right on Main Street without banks and without the rules that they set that constrain the development process. For both the Clock Shadow building and this building, this approach gives us more flexibility to attract and maintain local tenants because we can charge affordable rents that are more aligned with our shared values for sustainability. We set a sustainable level of financial return. In this case, owners receive roughly a 6% return on their cash investment. But they also get the financial, social, and cultural benefits of the unique tenants that we attract that bring value back to Milwaukee. How many of you have been to Purple Door ice cream or eaten it? Look at that impact. Locally owned Float Milwaukee, which is a float spa. If you haven't done it, I recommend it. And the Center for Resilient Cities, which is a local nonprofit committed to environmental, sustainable places. As we made real estate more accessible through this project and attracted local tenants, we found that these remarkable projects do start to catalyze communities. Today, you probably think of Walker's Point as much more of a thriving, dynamic neighborhood, and while I certainly don't take all the credit, these projects really were at the starting point of an economic renaissance in the neighborhood approximately 10 to 15 years ago. But now we are victims of our success, and the area has begun to default back to the dominant systems. As traditional market dynamics move in, real estate has become increasingly unaffordable, certainly for me, and for average investors, as well as for many local triple bottom line businesses and tenants who would like to occupy the buildings. So what next? Partially in response to these kinds of market dynamics, I worked with several Milwaukeeans to start an all-volunteer effort called Fund Milwaukee. Fund Milwaukee is basically like an investment club. It's open to anyone. There's no minimum to be involved. You don't have to become an investor in a project, but it's for people who want to invest locally in triple or quadruple bottom line businesses. Often in my work, I find the greatest hurdle to bringing local ideas is lack of access to capital. The businesses we support through Fund Milwaukee are never the type that is going to make you a ton of money. They're going to make you things like delicious ice cream. So they don't attract venture funds or angel investors typically. They also are exceptionally high risk typically. And so traditional lenders usually balk at these deals as well. Fund Milwaukee is a way to move money from Wall Street to Main Street to our own neighbors, people we know, who we trust, who know have a brilliant idea that we know they're going to succeed with. We support local businesses, local entrepreneurs, and the local economy. I won't spend a lot of time on this side project, but Fund Milwaukee has grown to include more than 200 involved Milwaukeeans, and anyone's welcome to join. We have collectively funded more than 25 businesses. These are some. And we've done that with small loans as small as $1,000 up to equity investments, and we've now invested collectively more than $1 million. I now use this crowdfunding vehicle to raise equity for all of my real estate deals. They bring together neighbors and regular folks just like me who do it ourselves. So here's our owners. Any of you here? In this project, we took a typical group of Milwaukeeans. I recruited them through Fund Milwaukee. They not only funded the real estate, they also funded a business loan to Purple Door of $125,000 to help them expand their business. So there is equity in this deal and debt in this deal, all brought by these folks and some who aren't in the picture. I bet you recognize some of those people. So we made real estate development and local financial investment more accessible through that project example, but now we wanted to ask, can this model of local crowd-funded ownership and financing for businesses that are local work in the most economically challenged neighborhoods of Milwaukee? In this example of my work called The Commons, I co-developed with the nonprofit Walnut Way Conservation, a project located in the Lindsay Heights neighborhood. This building is located at 16th Street and North Avenue. However, we relied entirely on philanthropy. The building is an amazing food hub with an entrepreneurial fresh juicing company called The Juice Kitchen, a small outpost natural food store, a commercial kitchen that produces healthy school lunches, and a food-focused nonprofit called Fondy Food Center. While this project is completely amazing and required visionary philanthropists to lead, it effectively does rely on the same old real estate and financial systems. In other words, no traditional investors from the private sector, no traditional banks. Rather, we use philanthropic subsidy, which is a common tool in disinvested neighborhoods, and it's often the only economic tool. And as we all probably know, there is certainly so many need for donations and many deserving nonprofits, there is just not enough philanthropy to go around to change the trajectory of poverty and disinvestment in these neighborhoods. Oh, that slide went with that little point. Isn't that beautiful? So my last project that I'll talk about is I'm trying to learn if we can use private sector tools to innovate, even here in Milwaukee's lowest income neighborhood. This is the historic Wally Schmidt Tavern redevelopment. It's located at 1848 West Fond du Lac, incidentally right across the street from a Rotary project at Johnson's Park. We aim to move past philanthropy to crowdfund this as a local, neighbor-driven development at a level that is affordable to neighbors living in this Milwaukee's lowest income neighborhood. Our hope is to save this amazing historical gem. That's what it used to look like. We required this out of tax foreclosure after the building had suffered a fire and significant damage. It's on a neglected commercial strip where more than 50% of the current buildings stand vacant. With this building, we've introduced the concept in my company of co-development. We've recognized two things in the process of developing our model. First, in new neighborhoods, I'm an outsider. I can't connect to the assets and values of that community very naturally. I'm not from there, I don't often look like my neighbors in that neighborhood, and I don't know their personal experience as well. Those are important things to honor to have successful projects in neighborhoods. Second, by developing the capacity and skills of neighbors in the neighborhood we're working in, they themselves develop the skills and capacity to be able to do the next development in their own development themselves. We grow an army of change agents that really literally do it themselves without waiting for less desirable outsiders who might come in that actually rarely come in, and if they do, they usually bring something less desirable, like fast food restaurants and check cashing stores. I've partnered with an amazing neighbor, and we're co-developing this project. He brings credibility and wisdom and local connections that will be my tenants. I match it with my incredible wealth of real estate experience. We've raised $700,000. It's from a range of sources. In this case, we went to donations a little bit. We've blended. We went to an Indiegogo or Kickstarter campaign and raised $40,000, exceeding our goal from more than 100 donors. Many of them are in the room today. We raised $100,000 from grants from the city of Milwaukee, so there is public sector participation. We do have some debt, non-traditional, it's not a bank. And the last piece, we raised nearly $400,000 from a crowd of more than 40 co-owners. This is only half, and I apologize because several of you who are investors are here and aren't on that slide. We required a minimum of $1,000 per local owner. And I'm proud to say that nearly 30% of our owners are from the 2 lowest zip codes where the project is located. Would you guys mind if you're an investor in this in the room, raise your hand so people can see you? So construction on this project will be complete in 30 days. We've recruited a star restaurant called The Tandem, which has done a few pop-ups around town already, getting ready to open. We're seeking one more office tenant, if anybody's looking for a 2 or 3 office room suite. I'm moving Fixed Development's headquarters into this building. Here we're showing that neighbors in disinvested neighborhoods no longer need to rely on traditional financial and real estate systems. They can raise the money and redevelop the real estate themselves. If we can do this in Lindsay Heights, we can do it in any Milwaukee neighborhood, in any disinvested neighborhood, and do it really anywhere on any main street. One building at a time, joined together as neighbors. At least that's the way I see it. So, right on time. In a very quick nutshell, that's the story of Fixed Development. The question is, can you create places that are socially just, environmentally sustainable, and culturally rich while making a profit? Yes, the Clock Shadow building has proven we can. Can such projects attract other small businesses, local entrepreneurs, and provide opportunities for local, smaller investors to catalyze community revitalization? Yes. The Purple Door building and the collective transformation of Walker's Point over the last 10 years proves you can work outside traditional real estate and financial systems. Can we adapt these systems to innovate strategies and use them to transform our most disinvested neighborhoods by doing it ourselves? The Wally Schmidt Tavern redevelopment project is showing we can. With each of these projects, we build a growing base of neighbor owners, building local wealth that recirculates within the community on Main Street. We invest in local businesses that give back to the communities they're located in, and we build a growing pool of do-it-yourself developers who learn the skills of real estate development with us so that they can tackle the next project themselves. Our only limiting factor is time. Never enough time, and resources. We are always seeking new lead investors who typically take the first risks on each of our projects so that we have time to recruit the neighbors and tenants who complete our model with each new project. This is really the embodiment for me of my favorite Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. It is possible to change dominant systems. It is possible for the private sector to lead with mission-driven work that can also be financially viable. It's not easy, but we can fix this if we work together. Thank you. The Wally Schmidt Tavern is at 1848 West Fond du Lac Avenue. Thank you. The Tandem restaurant opens in September. Fried chicken.
Yeah, from your experience now, if you look back at your Clock Shadow building and you were doing it again, how much do you think you could lower the costs just from everything you've learned and relationships and all?
Yeah, the question is, if I were to do, for example, the Clock Shadow building again, which was a $7 million project, from the learning curve I've gotten up, could I do it less expensively or more efficiently? Not to say I didn't learn a million trillion things and make a ton of mistakes. It would be incredibly difficult to do less expensively. The only way to do it, the most expensive aspects of that development were many of the environmental systems. So what has changed in the last 10 years is that some environmental systems have become more affordable. So we didn't sort of go bleeding edge on some of the projects and products in that. But in some respects, it would have been more expensive. Some of the funds we use were sort of moments in time that are no longer available so some of the brownfield funding that we got is those pools have dried up. So I don't know. I think I would have not done it. With most of my projects, I get to the end and say, I will never do that again. But I keep surviving, so I don't know how to go.
You got the 88-9 Radio Milwaukee building in your slideshow, but didn't make any comments about it. What was your involvement, if any, or why did you show that?
Yeah, oh, thanks for asking. I only have a limited time. So I'm a founding board member of Bubbler Bikes, which also showed up in the slides, and that's a really important passion for me. And I'm also on the board of directors of Radio Milwaukee, which is a cultural institution here in Milwaukee, on 88.9 on your dial. I was part of the building development committee, so I helped locate that in Walker's Point and redevelop the project for the organization. Mm-hmm. Are there national models? I love that question. I'm such a doer and fixer and on-the-ground boots worker. I'm sure there are probably some. Actually, I'm sure there aren't. I'm just so unique and exceptional and brilliant. What I would say is with respect to crowdfunding, certainly, we've seen over the past few years, when I founded Fund Milwaukee, the word crowdfunding was not even in the vernacular. It was a new idea, and there's subsequently been legislation nationally and in the state to allow for this. We just circumvent that like we usually do and just didn't wait for that to happen. So crowdfunding has changed. You now see real estate portals that allow for crowdfunding of real estate. Many of those require you to be an accredited investor. Many of them follow the same traditional appraisal kinds of rules. So they're moving into the space, but not in a way that I think is ultimately going to get to the neighborhoods I work in. But certainly, I'm sure every city has a quirk like me doing some of this crazy stuff. You know, it's possible. Back there.
Is there anyone else in Milwaukee doing this kind of work?
Is there anyone else in Milwaukee doing this? Anybody here feel like they're doing it? No. You know, I feel like there are many nonprofit actors in this space and some foundations trying to work in this space. I think there are limitations. I really think the long-term sustainability of these main streets needs it to move to a version of the market, but not the traditional version of the market, and for it to be sustainable, because we can't rely on those visionary philanthropists forever, and those nonprofits many times aren't as skilled in this area as whatever their core mission might be. So, but I do see that work happening in the nonprofit sector. My hope is that by using this co-development model and working with other individual neighbors, I'll build others who can keep doing this on their own. But to really scale it, I think you'd need a larger fund. Rather than kicking and screaming for each one at a time, you'd have to kind of try and aggregate it and do a little bit more at once, and that would take more money and more people, and it's just never the time available that I have to do that. But I think let me know if you all know of people out there. I'd love to find my compatriots and have a beer. I tend to be so different from traditional developers, but certainly I'd partner with anybody interested. The issue for me is also resources. It's not that if I come to a new project with a co-developer, I typically need them to bring their resources. And traditional developers tend to look at my pro formas with skepticism, and many of their investors require a higher rate of return. They look more predominantly at the financial return, and it just doesn't exist in these markets. So it rules out a huge portion. The question is, would more developers do this, or is there ways to partner? There are. I think the place I tend to look for investors is not traditional real estate investors. It's philanthropists who traditionally donate their funds. And my pitch to them is, consider investing for a return. You actually can get your money back. You build an asset, you get a return, and you make change, versus the scenario where you just donate it and the money is gone. That has been where I found a large amount of my investors. The rest tend to be exceptional and visionary, but there are many reasons why projects don't work. I'm not critical of my peers. They do amazing work in places that need it, that make a strong, thriving city. Without a core of our city, we wouldn't have, opportunity to keep spreading out. So we got to start somewhere. If you know somebody looking for a partner, though, I'm always open. I just have no time. Yeah, right here.
Have you had projects that you've had to abandon because of barriers that presented themselves? And if so, what kind of barriers have those been?
Have you ever met an entrepreneur who stops at barriers? I mean, I would say that I've never, so far, every project that I've completed has generated the projected return. That has been through extraordinary pain and suffering to overcome a million barriers. But to date, my success rate is 100%. Personally, I expect that I've failed a million times in there, but I'm generating those returns. So I haven't yet. I think the Wally Schmidt project is really, every project stresses me really hard. I think the concern with the Wally Schmidt project will be, will the tenants remain strong and generate the return? In the neighborhoods where I have built in the past, like Walker's Point, other parts of Milwaukee and Shorewood, the markets tend to be more stabilizing around them. In the tougher neighborhoods I'm now moving into, will I continue to attract the tenants? I was very concerned I wouldn't find a restaurant to move into 18th and Fond du Lac that would be able to have the wherewithal to be successful. And we've recruited an amazing entrepreneur. So the risk there is whether it will remain viable over time. And I think it's too early to say, but I'm certain that there will be failures, and it requires investors with that long view to look through some of those years where the return does drop. Right here.
Is it better to have scattered buildings, or is it better to try and build a cohesive neighborhood?
Thanks, George. Do you hear that? So is it scattered site or cohesion? I think in general, economic tipping points rely on that, density of projects. Do I have to do them all? No. In Walker's Point, I did a few. I did probably 4 projects, and then others started to move in, and there just became an overwhelming momentum and density that had very little to do with me over time. In Lindsay Heights, same thing. There are scattered sites occurring that I'm not leading, but it's definitely not a place I would have gone without. There's almost $50 million worth of investment happening in and around where my projects are in Lindsay Heights. Many of them are nonprofits, but nonetheless, they are economic transformation occurring that I'm building on. If you just go in isolation, the main reason it doesn't work in neighborhoods that are super disinvested is you need businesses to generate your income and your pro forma, and people don't want to go run their business in a location where there isn't economic vitality happening. So definitely we want to look for building blocks upon each other in neighborhoods. So, you have to build outward. Hi, how are you?
Julie, you've done a remarkable job, and you're to be commended, and I'm aware of your history and your story, but it is in your DNA development, and I know you've done this without family money, but would you share your DNA?
Oh, just because you're friends with my dad. My maiden name is Lesage, and I grew up in a real estate family. It's a family business. My father is Pat Lesage, and he formed a company called Mooney Lesage. His partner's picture was up on that, along with Jim and a few others. So they really set the stage for teaching me what suburban real estate development looks like. And like any good kid, I backlashed against them. So yeah, I did. Although, it's interesting, it was more osmosis. I didn't really, I interned, I think, at Mooney Lesage Group, which is now, what's their name? MLG. So yeah, I do have it in my DNA. And my mother as well, entrepreneurial, both of them. Patrick. What's next? A nap. And I'm going to go throw up after finishing this. I think where I want to go now is to figure out how you weave together these stories and transform Main Streets. I'm really embedded in Milwaukee. That's my mission. I do believe these things can be replicated outside of Milwaukee. That's not where I want to be, but I hope other people do that with this message. But I'd like to scale this. I'd like to see more of this happen, build more momentum, build more than one project at a time. To do that, it's going to take probably some dedicated effort to raise what I've thought about is the idea of raising a fund that allowed us to find projects. Right now, projects come one at a time, and if I had a little bit more time to figure out some intentional strategies and develop some intentional partners, maybe consider working with more than one person besides myself in an actual employment arrangement. That's one strategy. I mean, I think I want to keep replicating the co-development, Main Street neighborhood-driven projects one at a time. I'm going to keep focused in Lindsay Heights until I have the capacity to grow beyond that. But that's my immediate goal, is to try and keep raising some seed funding and identifying some next phase projects to keep building outward from the places that are working. And right now, Lindsay Heights is my focus. And I also am looking for partners, co-developers who would like to come to the table and do a project together. I have high expectations of my partners, though, so just be forewarned. Hey, Thelma.
I'd like to say, as a resident of the Lindsay Heights.
Thanks. Thelma and Steve are investors in the Wally Schmidt project, along with those 43 others. So it's a really diverse cross-section of Milwaukeeans who is involved in that project, and it really makes my heart swell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie.
An MCM production.